Olivia's heart raced as she stared at the photo in the millionaire's wallet. Her father's face, young and smiling, staring back at her. She had known him as a man of kindness, but this was something else. The woman across from her, Isabel Garrison, had money, power, and fame, but the look in her eyes told a different story. "Why is my father's photo in your wallet?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling. Isabel froze and the air between them thickened. "I think it's time we talked," she said softly. Her voice edged with something Olivia couldn't quite place. What was the woman hiding? And what did it have to do with her father? The truth was about to unravel, and Olivia wasn't sure she was ready for the answers. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. It was a quiet afternoon at the Riverstone Bistro, a small but cozy restaurant in the heart of the city. Olivia Williams, a waitress in her late 20s, wiped her hands on her apron as she made her way back to the counter. The lunch rush had just ended, and the air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and roasted chicken, a scent that always reminded her of the long hours she spent serving food to the many faces that came and went. She was exhausted, her feet sore, from running around all day, but there was a sense of peace in the calm that followed the chaos of the rush. She had been working at the bistro for 2 years, and in all that time, she had grown accustomed to the ebb and flow of the customers. Most were regulars, businessmen, college students, couples looking for a quick bite, or families gathering to enjoy a meal. They came and went just like the hours of the day, and Olivia learned not to get too attached. She greeted them with a smile, took their orders, and moved on. But today, something was different. A woman walked into the bistro, her presence so striking that it seemed to command the attention of the room. Olivia paused for a moment, her hands still resting on the counter as she watched the woman make her way to the host stand. She was tall, with an air of grace that seemed to follow her every movement. Her attire was impeccable, soft jade silk that shimmered under the restaurant's soft lighting, with pearls that caught the light as she moved. Olivia could tell immediately that this was no ordinary customer. The woman's name was Isabel Garrison. Olivia recognized her face instantly. Isabel was one of the wealthiest women in the city, a philanthropist with a long list of charity events and billion-dollar foundations. She was often in the news, behind charity galas and high-profile fundraisers. The bistro was a far cry from the luxurious settings Isabel was accustomed to, but there she was, standing at the host stand, waiting to be seated. The maitre d' practically bowed as he led her to a table by the window. Olivia couldn't help but notice how the woman seemed to carry herself with a quiet power, the kind of presence that made people take notice without her saying a word. As she moved past the counter, Olivia caught a glimpse of her face. Something about the way Isabel held herself made Olivia feel as though she was in the presence of someone who was used to getting what they wanted. After a few moments, Olivia gathered herself and walked over to Isabel's table, the routine of her job kicking in. She pasted on a warm smile and greeted her. "Good afternoon. May I start you with something to drink?" Isabel looked up from her menu and their eyes locked. For a brief moment, Olivia felt a strange jolt, a static energy, like an invisible thread connecting them. It wasn't recognition. It was something deeper, something that tugged at Olivia's chest. She quickly looked away, clearing her throat. "Just water. No lemon?" Isabel said, her voice smooth, calm, and almost distant. Olivia nodded and turned to leave, but something made her pause. As she walked back toward the counter, she couldn't shake the feeling that Isabel was watching her every move. The sensation was uncanny, like a spotlight following her wherever she went. She glanced back briefly, but Isabel was still staring at her gaze intense and unblinking. Throughout the rest of Olivia's shift, she couldn't stop thinking about Isabel. Every time she returned to check on the table, Isabel's eyes seemed to follow her. There was something about her that Olivia couldn't place, something that made her uneasy and curious at the same time. Finally, Olivia returned to refill Isabel's water glass. As she leaned over the table, she caught sight of something strange tucked into the side pocket of Isabel's wallet. A small, worn photograph, half visible behind a platinum credit card. Olivia froze, her breath catching in her throat. She recognized that face. A young man with a soft smile, kind eyes, and a short afro. Her father. Her heart skipped a beat as she leaned in closer, her hand trembling as she pointed to the photograph. "That's my father," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Isabel looked up, startled. She quickly closed the wallet, but it was too late. Olivia stepped back, her mind racing. "Why is my father's photo in your wallet?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of confusion and disbelief. Isabel's expression shifted, her calm demeanor faltering for the first time. She stiffened, her jaw tightening as she placed the wallet back in her bag. "I think you're mistaken," she said quietly, her voice suddenly colder. Olivia's pulse raced. "No," she insisted, her voice gaining strength. "That's my father. His name is David Myers. He died when I was 9. Isabel's fingers tightened around her purse, her face unreadable. Olivia took another step closer, her hands shaking. "Where did you get that photo?" she asked, her voice urgent. Isabel stood slowly, her gaze never leaving Olivia. "Perhaps we should talk somewhere private," she said softly, the calmness in her voice now tinged with something darker. Olivia hesitated for a moment. Her shift wasn't over, but something in Isabel's voice told her that this wasn't a conversation that could wait. Without another word, they moved to the back patio of the bistro, the quiet of the empty space pressing in on them as they sat down at a small table. Olivia's heart was pounding in her chest as she waited for Isabel to speak. Isabel sat carefully, placing her purse on her lap, her fingers fidgeting with the strap. "I was hoping this day would never come," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, and Olivia, still reeling from the discovery, waited for the truth to come. The quiet hum of the bistro's air conditioner was the only sound that filled the space between Olivia and Isabel. The patio, usually a place for couples or small groups enjoying a leisurely drink, was now eerily still, as if the world outside had paused for this moment. Olivia sat across from Isabel, her heart still pounding from the unexpected discovery. The photograph of her father, tucked inside Isabel's wallet, was a mystery she couldn't yet unravel. Isabel's face, usually composed and polished, was now clouded with emotion, her hands trembling as they rested on the table. Olivia's mind raced. She had always known that her father had been a kind and gentle man, one who had worked tirelessly to provide for her. But until now, she had never imagined there could be more to his past, secrets that had been buried long before Olivia was born. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, as Olivia waited for Isabel to speak. Isabel took a slow, deliberate breath, her eyes avoiding Olivia's gaze for a moment as if she were gathering the strength to revisit memories she had long buried. "Your father," Isabel began, her voice barely a whisper, "wasn't just a man who passed through my life. He was everything to me." Her words hung in the air, and Olivia could feel the weight of them as they settled over the space between them. For a moment, Olivia couldn't speak. She had known her father as a hard-working man, a provider, a loving parent who had always done his best for her. But to hear Isabel speak of him in such a way, as though he had been her entire world, sent a shock through her. What did Isabel mean? Could her father have had a life? No, a love that Olivia never knew about? Isabel seemed to sense Olivia's confusion, and she continued, her voice softer now, as if the words were too heavy for her to say aloud. "I was young, just a student at Rose Hill University when I met your father," Isabel explained, her eyes distant as she relived the memory. "He worked part-time at the campus library. He was always so polite, so kind. I remember him slipping poetry books onto the return cart, hoping I would pick them up. Then he would ask me what I thought of them. It was all so innocent, but I fell in love with him before I even understood what love really meant." Olivia listened intently, her heart both heavy and hopeful. She never imagined that her father, the man who had raised her with so much care, could have been so much more than what she had known him to be. Her father, the man she had always thought was ordinary, was now being described as someone extraordinary, someone with a love story that had been hidden away for decades. Isabel paused for a moment, lost in her memories. The expression on her face softened as she continued. We had plans. We were going to run away together. But my family, she hesitated, her voice faltering, they didn't approve of him. Not because of who he was, but because of the color of his skin. They couldn't bear the thought of me being with a man who wasn't suitable. I begged them to understand, but they threatened to disown me. They said they would ruin his life, destroy everything he had. And he begged me to let him go. He told me it wasn't worth the price. Olivia's heart tightened as she absorbed Isabel's words. She had always known her father had struggled, that his life hadn't been easy. But she had never known that the hardships he faced were not just financial. They were emotional. They were about love and racism and the choices that were forced upon him. Isabel wiped a tear from her cheek, but her voice remained steady. I let him go, she said quietly. I couldn't bear the thought of him losing everything because of me. I chose my family. And I never saw him again. The words struck Olivia like a physical blow. Her father, the man who had loved her so deeply, had lost the woman he loved to the pressures of a world that wouldn't let them be together. It was a painful realization, one that made her heart ache in ways she had never expected. I didn't know, Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know he loved someone else. He never talked about it, not to me, not to my mother. He always smiled, always told me to lead with kindness. Isabel's expression softened. He loved you, she said gently, her eyes meeting. Olivia's with an understanding that only someone who had loved Thomas could have. He was proud of you always. I think about him every day. But when I found that photo, when I saw your name tag, Myers, it stopped me in my tracks. I didn't know you existed until today. Olivia sat back, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelation. It was as if her entire life had been built on a foundation of secrets, things she had never known. Her father, the man who had shaped her world, had a history that Olivia had never even dreamed of. And now, sitting across from Isabel, the woman who had once shared his love, she felt as though she were learning about him for the first time. Isabel reached into her bag and pulled out a small, folded letter, worn at the edges. She placed it gently on the table between them. This is the last thing I have of him, she said, her voice quivering. He wrote it to me the day before he left. He asked me to forget him, to move on. But I couldn't, and I never stopped carrying him with me. Olivia picked up the letter, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. The handwriting was familiar. The same handwriting she had seen in the letters her father had written to her as a child. As she read the words, she could feel the weight of them, the love, the sadness, the finality of a love that had never been fully realized. The letter was a farewell, a letter written with love and loss, and Olivia felt as though she were holding the very last piece of her father's heart in her hands. She looked up at Isabel, her eyes filled with unshed tears. He never stopped loving you, Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. He never stopped carrying you in his heart. Isabel nodded, her own tears falling freely now. And I never stopped carrying him, she said softly. Not until I saw you today. The truth had finally come to light. And in that moment, Olivia realized that she had been given something far greater than a secret. She had been given a connection to the man she had never fully known, to the love he had lost, and to the woman who had once been his world. The patio was silent save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. The sun, now lower in the sky, cast golden beams across the table, dappling the worn surface with patches of light. Olivia held the letter tightly, the edges soft from years of being handled, but the words on the paper burned through her. Isabel sat across from her, her hands folded gently in her lap, her eyes distant as she remembered a time long past. It felt as though time itself had slowed in the heavy stillness. Olivia, still holding the letter, felt as though her entire world had shifted. What had she known about her father? The man who had worked tirelessly for her, the man who had been her everything. Was that all there was to him? A loving father, a kind man who had kept his past hidden? Or was there more, as Isabel's words had hinted at? A history of love and loss, a history that Olivia never had the chance to explore. Isabel's voice, calm and steady, broke the silence. "I never wanted to keep the past from you," she said softly, her gaze now meeting Olivia's. "But when he left, I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought if I let him go, I could save him from the wrath of my family, from everything they would have done to him, to us. But it was never easy." Her voice trembled with the weight of memories long buried. Olivia swallowed hard. The pain in Isabel's words mirrored the pain in her own chest. "You didn't want him to disappear," she whispered, understanding. Now the silent grief Isabel had carried with her all these years. "He didn't want to leave you, but he thought it was better for you to live without him." Isabel nodded slowly. "Yes, but that was before everything. Before I realized the cost of that decision. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I left a hole in my heart. And then I found out he had a daughter, a life that was hidden from me, a family he never spoke of." Isabel's voice faltered, but she took a deep breath and steadied herself. "I didn't know you existed until today. I never knew that he had left something behind in this world, someone who would carry his legacy, his name." Olivia's chest tightened. She had always thought she was the only part of her father's story left. She had been told little about his past, only that he had been a hard-working man who loved his family. But this was different. This was a man with dreams, with love, with a history that had been erased by the decisions of others. It was a history that Olivia was now part of, and she wasn't sure how to feel about it. Could she understand it? Could she forgive Isabel for the years of silence? Could she forgive herself for not knowing the truth? Isabel, sensing Olivia's turmoil, leaned forward slightly. "I know this is a lot to take in. It's a burden, a heavy one. But I thought if I shared this with you, if you knew, it would bring us closer to the truth. He loved you, Olivia. He did. He wanted you to know that he would have given everything to be part of your life. But he couldn't." A lump formed in Olivia's throat as she thought about her father. All those years of not knowing, of growing up with a mother who never spoke about his past, who never mentioned his lost love. Olivia had lived her life believing her father had little to offer beyond his dedication to her. But now she was learning that there had been so much more, and there was still more to uncover. Olivia looked down at the letter again. The words on the page were simple, yet filled with so much emotion, so much unspoken love. She felt a deep sadness for the man she had known as a father, for the man who had carried this grief in silence. But there was also something else, something that made Olivia feel closer to him than ever before. She was learning who he really was, beyond the title of father, and that knowledge gave her a sense of connection that she had never had before. "Did he ever talk about me?" Olivia asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at Isabel, searching her face for answers. Isabel smiled faintly, a sad, bittersweet smile. "Yes," she said softly. "He spoke of you often. He was proud of you, Olivia. He talked about your eyes, the way you smiled, how much you reminded him of your grandmother. He told me that you were everything he had ever wanted in life. He loved you more than words could say." The tears that Olivia had been holding back finally began to fall. She wiped them away hastily, but they kept coming, falling like rain, soaking her cheeks. She had never known this side of her father, the side that Isabel had known, the side that had been stolen from her. The realization that her father had loved Isabel, that he had fought for a love he could never have, was almost too much to bear. Isabel, too, was quietly crying now, her hands trembling as she wiped away her own tears. "I never meant for it to be like this," she whispered. "I never wanted you to carry this burden. But fate has a way of leading us to the things we can't escape, doesn't it?" Olivia nodded, her heart heavy but full. Fate had brought her here to this moment, and it wasn't something she could run from anymore. She had learned things today about her father, about herself, and about the woman sitting across from her. And though it hurt, though it felt like her heart was breaking, Olivia knew she couldn't ignore the truth anymore. She had to understand it, to accept it, no matter how painful it was. "I'm not sure I can ever fully understand this," Olivia said quietly, her voice breaking with emotion. "But I know one thing. My father loved you, and I'm glad he had that love in his life, even if it wasn't for long." Isabel nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "He did. And I am so sorry for the pain it caused you. You deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know who he really was." There was a long silence between them, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with understanding, with grief, with love, and with the promise of healing. Olivia knew there was more to uncover, more to learn, and more to understand. But for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of peace. Peace in the knowledge that her father's story was not just hers to carry. It was a story that belonged to both her and Isabel. And it was a story they would share, no matter how difficult it was. The weight of the silence was no longer heavy. It was simply the pause before something new could begin. And for Olivia, that new beginning was just beginning to unfold. As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the patio, Olivia and Isabel remained in silence, the weight of their conversation settling into their bones. The golden light seemed to stretch time itself, giving them both the space to breathe and reflect. It had been hours since they had first sat down together, and yet it felt like they had shared a lifetime of emotions in that brief time. Olivia's mind was still swirling, grappling with the revelations that had come so suddenly, so unexpectedly. She glanced at Isabel, whose face had softened, her earlier tension giving way to a quiet vulnerability. The woman who had once seemed so untouchable, so distant, was now someone who shared not just memories of Olivia's father, but an intimate part of his story, one that Olivia had never known. For the first time in her life, Olivia felt as though she was standing on the edge of something monumental. She wasn't sure what it was, but it felt like the beginning of something important. "Olivia?" Isabel began, her voice calm but filled with an undercurrent of emotion. "I know this isn't easy. It's a lot to take in. I can only imagine what you must be feeling right now, and I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused by not being honest with you earlier. But I want you to know from the very bottom of my heart that I never meant to hurt you." Olivia swallowed the lump in her throat, the tears that had been building up in her eyes threatening to spill over again. "You didn't," she said softly. I'm just trying to process all of this." Her voice cracked and she quickly wiped her eyes, trying to regain control. "It's so much. I thought I knew everything about my dad, but now I see there was so much more to him, so much I never knew." Isabel nodded, understanding the depth of Olivia's pain. "I know. I've carried the guilt of keeping him from you for so long. I didn't want you to feel abandoned by him, but I didn't know how to reach out. After all these years, when I saw your name tag, Myers, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just walk away." Olivia took a deep breath, feeling as though a great weight was being lifted from her shoulders. Isabel's honesty, her willingness to share this part of her life, felt like a bridge between two women who had never known each other but were now connected by the man they had both loved in different ways. The raw truth of their conversation hung in the air, but it wasn't suffocating. It was healing. "I've always felt like I was missing something," Olivia confessed, her voice steady now, though still filled with emotion. "I grew up thinking my father had such a simple life. He was just a regular guy. But now I realize he was so much more. He had dreams and love and a whole other life that I never knew about. It's like I've been living with one piece of him, and now I'm finding the rest of him." She paused, looking down at the letter Isabel had given her, her fingers gently tracing the edges. "It feels like I'm discovering my father all over again. Isabel watched her closely, her expression softening. You are, she said quietly. But it's not just about discovering him. It's about discovering yourself too. You're part of his story, Olivia. And now that you know more, you can find peace with it. You're not just his daughter. You're his legacy too. The weight of Isabel's words settled over Olivia, and she realized that the woman sitting across from her was right. The man she had known as her father was not just a simple man who worked hard to provide for his family. He had been a person with passions, with love that had been silenced by the world around him. And now, through Isabel, Olivia was getting to know that side of him, a side that had been hidden away for so long. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time, they were different. They weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of release, of letting go. Olivia felt like she was finally shedding the layers of grief that had covered her heart for so many years. She had always wondered why her father had seemed to carry such an air of sadness, such a quiet sorrow. But now she understood. He had loved and lost and carried the weight of that love with him. And though he was no longer here to tell his story, Olivia was now a part of it. I don't know what to do with all of this, Olivia admitted softly, glancing up at Isabel. It feels like there's so much I still don't know, but it also feels like I found something I never even realized I was searching for. Isabel gave her a gentle smile, her eyes filled with understanding. You don't have to figure everything out right away, just take it one step at a time. I'll be here, Olivia. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone who knew him in a way you didn't, I'm here. We can take this journey together, however long it takes. Olivia nodded, feeling a sense of comfort in Isabel's words. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't alone in her grief. Isabel had not come to replace the loss of her father. Nothing could ever do that. But she had offered Olivia something invaluable, the chance to understand her father's past, to find a connection that had been lost for so long. I would like that, Olivia said quietly, a sense of peace settling over her. I would like to know more about him, about you, about everything. Isabel smiled warmly, reaching across the table to gently touch Olivia's hand. We'll start small. There's no rush. I'm here for you, whenever you're ready. As they sat there together, the light of the setting sun casting its soft glow on the patio, Olivia felt a quiet hope begin to bloom in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, or where this new connection with Isabel would lead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. A path that, despite its twists and turns, would lead her to a deeper understanding of who her father had been, and who she was, as a daughter, as a woman, and as part of a legacy that had been hidden for far too long. Weeks passed, and Olivia and Isabel began meeting regularly, sharing stories, memories, and moments of quiet reflection. They talked about their fathers, their families, their dreams. Slowly, the bond between them grew. And though Olivia would never fully understand all that her father had been, she felt a sense of completion, a sense of healing that she had never experienced before. It was as though, through Isabel, she had found a new piece of herself, a part of her father's story that had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. One Sunday morning, Isabel arrived at the cafe with a small velvet box in her hands. She placed it gently on the table. Between them, her eyes filled with emotion. I want you to have this, she said softly. Olivia opened the box, her breath catching in her throat. Inside was a simple gold locket. She carefully opened it, and on one side was the same photograph of her father, smiling that familiar warm smile. On the other side was a photo of Olivia, taken the week she graduated high school. Isabel's voice was barely a whisper as she spoke. To hold what I lost, and what I found. Olivia's heart swelled as she took the locket in her hands, tears spilling down her cheeks once more. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me back part of him. Isabel reached out, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it over Olivia's. It's not just part of him, Olivia. It's part of you, too. And in that moment, under the soft morning light, Olivia realized that the journey of healing had only just begun. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready to walk it.